here we go. The University of Alberta respectfully acknowledges that we're located on Treaty 6 territory, a traditional gathering place for diverse Indigenous peoples, including the Cree, Blackfoot, Métis, Nakota Sioux, Iroquois, Dene, Ojibwe, Saulteaux, Anishinaabe, Inuit, and many others whose histories, languages, and cultures continue to influence our vibrant community. Here at Beaver Hills House in Cree, also known as Edmonton. Now, if you've ever heard of collaboration, you've probably wondered, is it communist? And that's because in North America, we really applaud the individual effort. In Hollywood, we have immortalized the lone hero. In business, we have the self-made man. In politics, if you hint at collaboration, you might just lose an election, so be careful. We value the part over the whole. We value, of all the different courses of a meal, the dessert more than every other course. On teams, we value the star athlete over the rest of the players. This really tells us that dessert is delicious. Apple pie is a good example of how we privilege the singular over the many, because really it's not one apple in a pie. There's a whole bunch of apples in the pie. So really it should be called lots of apples sliced up and put into the pie. Single serve yogurt is something that we privilege over the environment, over the entire cow. Another example of how single serve elements are always more important. Probably the most egregious representation is in opera. When they warm up, they say, me, 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 me. It's very, very selfish. Even the sacred union of marriage, which is supposed to symbolize collaboration, sometimes it has members saying, just do it yourself tonight when it comes to romantic dinners. Now, all of these straight up facts that I'm telling you do make me still think about the value of collaboration. And when I think of collaboration, I think it's ringing in my ear or my ear. For Van Gogh, it would definitely be my ear. But I don't know if you'd say mine ear, my ear, or my ears, plural. But if I check my smartphone, I'll be able to figure it out. If I check Google or YouTube or ChatGPT, I can try to find the answer. And if I try to find the answer that way, am I collaborating? Because all those elements, they work through algorithms. Having said that, North America does believe in some things that are collaborative, like music, right? Or talking. Talking can be collaborative. You listening to me right now might be a form of collaboration if you're hearing me. On that note, if a tree falls in the forest, does it make a sound if no one's around to hear it? I say it does because it's reverberating sound waves nonetheless. So that Zen riddle has been solved. Thank you very much. We also value teams in North America if you've seen any superhero films. And of course, the North American institution of the family is also one of the collaborative units that exists. And some units in North America, like the mafia, they kill for collaboration. So we have some idea that collaboration does exist in North America. I like the word itself because it tells us how you're supposed to function. You cooperate, you do some kind of work together, and then you report your activities. And this research led me into the 1990s, and Vanilla Ice in particular, who was a preeminent research in collaboration. This is the lyrics to one of his songs. All right, stop, collaborate, and listen. You're going to make a brand new invention. First, delegate. Next, spin around, cooperate. Finally, communicate your plans. Move forward hand in hand. Now, the scary part of the lyrics is this one. If you get a low mark, blame the weakling, complain to your teacher, make a big stink. You want to minimize that potential problem with group work. How do you do that? Well, exercise caution with haphazard group work. Instead, consider deliberate design in your group work. This brings us to a fellow named Kenneth A. Bruffy. Bruffy is also what I call just having breakfast coffee and nothing else. But Bruffy tells us that cooperative goals happen when you work in harmony with mutual support to solve a problem or complete a task. And Smith from engineering says if you got small groups to work together, they could maximize one another's learning to the point that they achieved higher compared to competitive and individualistic learning. So there's benefits that come through collaborative learning. And these benefits can come whether you're cooperative or collaborative. Some like to distinguish between the cooperative and collaborative approach. Cooperative is seen as more cognitive, so it's often associated with STEM courses. Collaborative is about the social construction of knowledge, so it's often associated with humanities and more situational things. Regardless, both forms have interactive group work. And the situational part, it can happen in STEM courses or in humanities courses. So really, it depends on how you design things, because there are facts and so on in humanities, and there are interpretations and debates in the STEM courses. Collaborative can be thought of as an umbrella term, wherever there's intentional co-laboring that leads to meaningful learning. So cooperation usually comes under collaborative on these larger concept designs. So if you're doing something collaborative, it's about teamwork, interaction, accountability, and interdependence. At a cross-cultural place like the University of Alberta, there's cross-cultural communication. Students need to be flexible when they're working with others, but also focused in order to achieve a goal. So they're not just learning the knowledge, they're also learning how to work together. And the classroom space changes because of this. In particular, students begin to shift how they relate to the instructor, because you're all together. Students and instructor are creating knowledge and memorable moments together. A disclaimer: if you're going to deliberately create a interactive, collaborative activity, you should look at what type of course you have and organize things accordingly. And you can consult with someone from CTL. They can help collaborate with you to help design or tweak an interactive exercise to make it work as best as possible in your class. The general approach that I've used, though, is just I look at a learning outcome I have, think of some assignments that align with the learning outcome, and think of an evaluation that aligns with the assignment. So there's a nice smooth flow from outcome to assignment to evaluation. That tends to work, at least for me. Now, what's a learning outcome? It's what you want your students to learn. So at CTL, Graham, Anita, and Brad have done webinettes on learning outcomes. And it's basically seeing things from the student's perspective. And when it comes to collaboration, you need to think of these categories. Your task has to be relevant to the course and to the student. The student has to have the ability to complete the task. There's a balance of teamwork and individual accountability. You should be able to delineate the roles necessary and outline the stages of the activity so students can complete that collaborative task. And if you have those components, then you're on your way to designing a good collaborative task. When you design a good collaborative task, then you'll see that your students are going to be active learners. They're going to contribute to the classroom atmosphere and learning. They're accountable to one another in their groups, so you don't have to be a helicopter instructor and look over everything, because they'll police one another in a way. And everyone is a source of knowledge in this approach. And that helps to create knowledge, meaning, and learning for everyone. So one example that I've used in my class is a fallacy commercial. So I was trying to teach critical thinking. And so I wanted them to learn logical fallacies so that when they think better, they'll be able to write more clearly. And so I turn that objective into some outcomes. So they need to recognize logical fallacies, explain the type of mistake according to the criteria we cover, and explain why there's a mistake in the reasoning in an example that they encounter. So I started off doing this by just thinking that I need to have a test on critical thinking and fallacies. And I just worked backwards from there. So I gave lectures, so old school sage on the stage. I gave a reading about fallacies and an interactive PowerPoint where they can study on their own. And then they moved into groups to invent a product that first-year university students need. And it just could be any imaginative product. They could go silly and do whatever. And they had to turn that into a commercial, either as a video or just a presentation in front of the class. And they had to fill their commercial with as many logical fallacies as possible. And the class then, when the group presented, the class would try to identify correctly what the fallacies were. If there were any mistakes, I would correct and clarify between the class. Sometimes the groups made mistakes, so I'd clarify things. And then I took a random selection of these fallacies and put it on the test. So everyone is participating in building a part of the test, but they're also studying and learning and cooperating and creating elements all together in their learning process. So this worked out very well. So the design was sort of a backward design, you can call it. I had a test, I had groups in class collaborate to build a part of the test, which saved me time, had the group and the classes study via the presentations. They had to work together to create a presentation applying their learning. And I began everything as just lecturing to them and voicing the parameters of the task. Another example is a murder mystery with no bloodshed whatsoever. So if you're queasy, don't worry. And this one was done relatively similarly, but this one I had to do a lot of things. I had to teach critical thinking, creative writing, logically sound writing, cooperation, collaboration, reading skills, analysis, while sustaining their attention. So that's tough to do. But if I trim it down to the main outcomes, it was I wanted them to recognize a line of reasoning that is logically sound, collaborate to create a line of reasoning in their murder mystery narrative, and explain when they're solving other people's murder mysteries what the means and motive are in a logically sound way, while pointing out the killer and minimizing their bias and distractions. So I gave a lecture on those things. They had a murder mystery to read. And by reading the murder mystery, they realized that a lot of murder mysteries are not really well designed in terms of fairness, because they have missing clues. So really those stories tend to highlight the genius of the protagonist, the detective. And their task then was to do something better, to make it a fair mystery so the reader could figure out through logical reasoning who the killer is. So the groups were divided into a narrator with different suspects, one of them being the killer. The class functioned as detectives. So the groups either one class put all their stuff on to E class, and the other class members would write down the responses to who they think the killer was, and they'd get graded that way. And then others would present to the class, and the class would function as detectives and try to explain who they thought their killer was according to the group's presentation. And once again, if anything was unclear in the group's mystery, I would ask them to clarify, correct it before they present to the class. Or if anything came up in the class during their exchange, I would correct things. And then again, they're collaborating to build a part of a test. So a similar sort of backwards design. I want them to participate in creating a part of the test, but I also lead into it with group studying that is active, having everyone work together in order to contribute equally, but also activate their learning. They had a vested interest. And it was interesting to see many of them were trying to be strict and trick one another. Like they were stricter than if I was to create this assignment for them. Now this picture here is going to show you how the bee and the flower doesn't go away. Individual work doesn't go away in collaboration. But what this does is the collaborative approach acknowledges that there's a whole bunch of bees and that we can have a hive mind, bring our collective faculties, personalities, experiences, cultures, and resources all together in order to solve a problem, create an activity, or create an output of some sort. So we're harnessing the hive mind with this approach. Collaboration is all around us. You probably do some kind of collaborative activity in your class already. And if you tweak it in some ways, you can make it a crucial part of your learning. These are the sources that I've used. And thank you so much for listening to me today and collaborating, at least by listening, and collaborate more if you want to stick around and talk about your collaborative approaches in your class.